In today's video, I'm going to revisit my LAR surgery and tell you all about how the recovery went while I was in the hospital, and also just tell you things in general that you can expect during a hospital stay. If you happen to be new here, welcome to Life as a Cancer Survivor. My name is Jelena, and in May of 2016, I was diagnosed with stage 3 rectal cancer. First, let me tell you what LAR surgery is. LAR, it stands for Lower Anterior Resection. So for mine, they removed 12 inches of colon and rectum. I don't know how much was divided into the colon and rectum, but it was 12 inches total that were removed, as well as 17 lymph nodes, and then they created a loop ileostomy. If you need a reminder on what that loop ileostomy is, it's where they pull a little bit of your small intestine out of the abdomen wall, they cut a slit in it, and your waste comes out of that instead of out of your butt. I left off in my LAR surgery video with having just shown you what my unbandaged wounds look like at about 8 p.m. that night, and had also just sat up on my own only for about 30 seconds or so, though, before the pain was too much and I had to lay back down. So John stuck around with me in the hospital room until about 10:30 that night, and then he left to go home, get some sleep, and so that he'd be at home the next morning when Mael woke up. Before he left, though, he made sure to get anything that I might need that night arranged on my tray table, like my tablet, my ice chips, my phone, and plugged in the electronics so that they wouldn't die during the middle of the night. He also made sure that all the wires and tubes and stuff that were connected to me, they were arranged in a way so that I could try to get comfortable and that I wasn't all twisted up in them. Because I was so sore in the abdomen still, I couldn't reach to get over to anything, and I couldn't lean down to try and fix the blanket or fighting with anything, that twisting motion, not happening. Then once I thought everything was arranged well, he left so I could try to get some sleep. I had some relaxing spa music playing on my tablet to try and drown out some of those noises. It didn't really work, but it did give me something to focus my attention on other than the sound of all of the machines hooked up to me, so I could kind of relax at least a little bit. I'm usually a side sleeper, but when I tried to roll over onto my side, first off, it's really hard to roll over when you've got all of these wires and tubes hooked up to you, and your abdomen is really sore, so it hurts trying to roll over. But then once you get onto your side, it felt like all of my organs and stuff over here were just shifting down from the right side towards the bed. Not comfortable. So once I got over onto the side and realized how uncomfortable that was, I just fell back over onto my back and tried to sleep. My surgeon came in first thing in the morning to see how I was doing. He said he wanted to see me walking more that day, or at all. And he said that my wounds were healing up nicely. Then he approved me to get on the clear liquids diet, so he called down to the cafeteria or the kitchen so that I could get breakfast that morning. Then he said he'd come by every morning to see how I was doing and said goodbye. This is what my breakfast of champions was that first morning. Apple juice, cherry jello, and a cherry popsicle. Since I was on the clear liquid diet, I didn't get a choice of the flavors. That's just what they brought up to me. I was given this incentive spirometer to use to help me take deep breaths and keep my lungs as strong and healthy as possible. I was supposed to use this multiple times a day, and the way you use it is you exhale as much air as you can out of your lungs, and then as you're breathing in, it's supposed to be a slow and constant inhale so that you keep this blue thing in between these two arrows, and then the plunger rises and you mark wherever you end up. So something like this. So I'm healthy so I can get it to the top. But when I first got out of surgery on that first day, well, the first morning, and I tried this thing, I could barely get it to the 1,000, and I was struggling hard to get it up there. So I asked John to try it and see how high a regular person should be able to get it. Well, he got it all the way up to the top. So I realized then that surgery had definitely had an effect on my lungs. I was starting to feel pain in my shoulders too, which I found out was from carbon dioxide that they pumped up my abdomen with. After surgery, it doesn't just dissipate, it goes out of your body by just rising and it bubbles up out of your shoulders. So it feels kind of like a sharp stabbing cramp pain. And it took about 2 days for that to actually completely dissipate. Just before lunch, I decided it was time for me to sit up because I really needed to get walking that day. So as you can see from this picture, although I'm smiling, I still look a little rough. Lunch was a repeat of breakfast. Then it was time for me to start walking. It was a huge production because I had to call down to the nurses because they needed to come and help me out of bed. So once I called, I had to wait a few minutes before someone made it down to my room. Then they had to unhook the hoses from the compression calves, or the compression sleeves on my calves, then help me sit up and swing my legs out of bed. They had to unplug the IV from the wall, or unplug the cord from the wall, and then they had to unhook my catheter bag from the bed and hang that on the pole, and then I could go for a walk. That first walk was rough. I made it halfway down the hallway to the nurse's station, which was maybe about 10 rooms, not even perhaps, before I had to turn around and head back to my room. It was a slow walk, and with every step that I took, I could feel pain in my stapled up scars. You don't realize how much your core actually works when even you're just walking until it's been ripped open and stapled back up. A little bit later that afternoon, my parents came to visit and brought my Ella with them, so I got lots of cute snuggles that afternoon. I took one more walk that evening before John left, and then I got the good news that I was getting upgraded to the full liquids diet the next day. I was excited, even though I wasn't super hungry yet still. I was just glad to not have to eat Jell-O, popsicles, and broth for another meal. When the phlebotomist left after my 6 a.m. blood draw, they forgot to close the door all the way. And shortly after they left, there was a huge gathering of nurses, doctors, I don't know who, employees right outside my door talking, so I couldn't fall back asleep. And I wasn't allowed to get out of bed on my own. I'm not sure I even could get out of bed on my own, so I kept hitting the nurse's button on my remote, but nobody was responding. I tried yelling to ask them to move or to close my door, but all that was coming out was like a whisper. So I don't know why my voice was hoarse, but I couldn't yell loud enough to get their attention. As a final resort, I grabbed the tissue box on my tray table and I chucked it at the door. But I was not strong from surgery. I was super weak, so I threw it, but it didn't land it didn't hit the door. It landed like 2 feet short, so I just laid there frustrated and waited until the meeting broke up and fell back asleep for a little bit. But it was my full liquids breakfast, so here's what I got. First off, coffee! Yay! The milk was to put in the coffee, and I also got orange juice to drink, the cream of wheat, and yogurt. I discovered that mixing the yogurt in with the cream of wheat made the cream of wheat a little more palatable because I'm usually not a cream of wheat fan. So it sweetened it and gave it flavor at the same time. So I mixed those two together to eat and then drank up the coffee and the orange juice. I was finally feeling like I had a little more energy, and today was the day that I was going to focus on walking as much as I could. I knew that exercise was good for recovery, so I needed to do as much of it as possible so that I could get the heck out of the hospital. For the first walk of the day, I had to have the certified nursing assistant, or CNA, come down to my room to help me get all disconnected, but I was able to slowly sit myself up, swing my legs over off the bed, and stand up on my own. Once everything was on the pole, I just went down to the nursing station and back for my very first walk. But then for following walks, since we knew what we had to do to disconnect and reconnect me, they said that with John's help, as long as he was there, I could go and do as many walks as I wanted to, and I didn't have to call for a CNA or a nurse anymore. It also helped that I got my catheter out that day, so that was one less thing that I had to take off and one less hose to deal with while I was sitting in bed. All those walks, though, definitely tired me out, so I took a lot of naps during the day as well. Since I was getting pretty crappy sleep at night, too, I figured some naps during the day wouldn't hurt. I also got a horrible headache that day, and when I mentioned it to the nurse, she said that it was probably from the morphine that I was hitting the button of all the time, and that since I was already on a lot of pain meds, they couldn't give me anything else to help get rid of the headache. So right then, I was done with the morphine and didn't hit the button anymore and had to suffer through that splitting headache for the rest of the day while my body adjusted to not being on the morphine anymore. But the good part about that was that since I wasn't using the morphine anymore, it meant all of my pain meds were being taken orally, which is one of the steps to being released from the hospital, is getting off of those IV pain meds and being able to manage it with just pills. So I was one step closer to being able to get out of the hospital, although I had to have a splitting headache to manage to get there. My ileostomy was in full working order by now, but since I was only on like a liquid diet, the output was like a greenish brown liquid basically. And I wasn't expected to change it or empty it yet because I couldn't get out of bed. So when it would get about half full, I would hit the nurse's button and a CNA would come down and they would empty it for me into a container because they had to measure how much output was coming out. It was pretty gross and I was not looking forward to having to empty that thing once I got home. Then that third night, again, didn't get a ton of sleep, got woken up all the time by the phlebotomist. So I was getting pretty tired of being in the hospital. Day 4, I was feeling pretty gross. And the CNA asked me if I wanted to take a shower that day. So I jumped on that. I was like, yes, please. So he said he needed to get one of the shower rooms ready because they weren't in your room itself. You had to go down the hallway and there was like a little corridor that had a couple of showers on either side of the hallway. So while he was getting that ready, I had my full liquids breakfast. I got a visit from my surgeon and he said he was happy with my progress. Said if things keep going this way, that the following day I'd be able to go home potentially. So that was just the kick in the butt that I needed. I knew I was going to spend all day walking and doing what I could so that I could get out of the hospital the next day. After breakfast, the CNA came back down and got everything detached from me so that I could go take a shower. He unhooked most of the stuff from the IV, but the needle was still in me and that needed to be protected and it wasn't allowed to get wet. So he had to put basically like a bag over it and wrap it up so that it wouldn't get wet during my shower. And John grabbed all my toiletries and I followed them down to the room that was ready for me for showering. There was a little bench for John to sit on where he didn't get wet necessarily from me showering. And since I had John with me, the CNA just let us be in the room by ourselves and said there was one of those ropes, the cords to pull, that if I needed anything to pull that. So he left and I got the shower going. The hot water from the shower coming down on me, it felt so good. And then washing my hair and being able to soap myself up, felt so nice. I just wanted to stand in that hot water forever. Well, I ended up standing in the hot water for a little too long because I started getting lightheaded and started to black out. So I shut the water off really quick and told John, and he, grabbed me in the towel, had me sit down, pulled the cord, and it seemed like forever, but John said it was only like 30 seconds to a minute, and the CNA came down to see what was going on. So John told him that I was almost passing out, and he said, well, it was probably from the hot water and for standing for so long. So he said, get dressed and I'll help you take her back to the room. So I dried off, sitting down, of course, and got dressed. I was still pretty weak, but I wasn't passing out anymore. So I just kind of like hooked arms and walked back down to my room with the help of the CNA and John. Once I was back in bed and I had laid down for a few minutes, had drank some water, I was feeling much better. Then came the first solid meal in 4 days. Mac and cheese, green beans, and egg salad sandwich. It was so good. It probably wasn't really that good, but it was solid food, so I was excited about it. It was so much food though to me that it took me over an hour to get it all down. Plus, with the new ileostomy, I was really paranoid about how my body was going to digest things with only half my digestive system working. So I chewed everything up super thoroughly. And sure enough, everything did go through okay because a few hours later, out came the green beans. That afternoon, I walked and walked and walked, getting solid food in me and just getting further away from the surgery day. I was getting more energy and it wasn't hurting as much when I was walking. I was improving so much that the nurse that night that was on duty, she canceled all of my blood draws for the night because they weren't worried at all about whatever they were testing for. So she thought it was more important that I actually got some sleep than for them to be drawing my blood every 4 hours. So although I didn't sleep through the night, it wasn't interrupted every 4 hours. So it felt so nice just to not be poked and have blood sucked out of me for a few hours. The next morning, when the surgeon visited me on my 5th day in the hospital, he said I could go home that day. I was so excited to get home, to be in my own bed, be out of the hospital. It was going to be awesome. That morning, all the stuff that was still attached to me was slowly getting disconnected. I could feel freedom coming. But before I was allowed to leave, I had to go through a bag change with an ostomy nurse, which I was happy for because that means it was going to be done at the hospital, so it would be a few days before I had to do it at home. But I was really nervous and still wondering how I was going to react to seeing my stoma without that bag on it. When the ostomy nurse made it to my room, she pretty much did most of the leading and demonstrating of how to do the bag change. And it turns out I wasn't grossed out by my stoma at all. I was, however, really sore still, so clicking that bag onto the new wafer that was attached to me was pretty painful. She did tell me, though, that I was going to get a home health nurse that would come visit my house a couple of times for the first 2 weeks that I was home, and that nurse would help me with my bag changes. So I was really happy about that because while we were doing the bag change, I was getting overwhelmed and was thinking there's no way I'm going to remember all of this and know what I need to do. So I was glad that that was going to be something that I could look forward to, that kind of help once I got home. After that, it was just waiting for my release papers to be processed and I was free. Once that happened, John took all my stuff down to our car and a volunteer brought a wheelchair up to my room and wheeled me down to the front door. I got out of the wheelchair and gingerly stepped into the car and very gently put my seatbelt on because the lap belt part went right across a bunch of the staples. So I kept it loose for the ride home because it hurt having the lap belt there on top of the wounds. Every crack, hole, pothole, bump in the road, it was painful. I felt them all reverberate through my abdomen. Plus, any turns, I couldn't keep myself upright because my abs were a wreck. So when we'd make a turn, I had to brace myself with my hands either side to keep me from falling over on the ride home. Once we got home, it felt so nice to be in a familiar place and know that there weren't going to be noisy machines hooked up to me. I was going to be in my own bed and I would have my family taking care of me. I was also a little scared though, because I didn't have that hospital bed anymore to help raise and lower me to get in and out of bed or even off the couch. I was going to have to do it all myself. I thought that a hospital stay would be a nice little break from cooking, cleaning, all the other tedious things that I had to do from a day-to-day basis. But it totally is not. You're in an uncomfortable bed. You're woken up every couple hours to make sure that you're still alive. The food isn't all that great. And you've got so much stuff hooked up to you, it's so hard to get comfortable. If you enjoyed this video, please give me a like by hitting the thumbs up over here and make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any of my future videos. Such as next week's video, where I will be talking about what that first bit of recovery looks and feels like once you get home from the hospital. If you've forgotten what an ileostomy is and need a refresher, or you haven't seen that video before, I've got the link right up here for you to click on. Thank you for watching.